Suppose you are a young healer in a healer's grove where the superintendent clearly does not like you. Then, by some twist of fate, the only person who vouched for you to get a place to learn falls severely ill, and the leadership of the grove goes straight to the malicious superintendent. Now, you know that if you get to speak to the ill healer, you might get answers to help them get better quicker. And not only that, you will rid the grove of this spiteful dictator. But here is the problem. The authoritarian superintendent has tightened the rules of the healer's grove, and trainee healers are not supposed to be anywhere out of bounds, or they risk losing their apprenticeship. What would you do? Would you save a friend or keep your learnership? Well, pineapple. A long time ago in a faraway land, a young clairvoyant found herself caught in this dilemma. Yemuari, the seer, who could predict the day and time a person would pass, together with the nature of the passing, had been condemned to the dungeons by the king for witchcraft. Yet luckily, her mother had run with her into this healer's grove, so they could not only tame her gift, but also help her become a better seer and healer. But she had only been in the grove for 3 moons, but so many things had happened already, most of which had been her doing even. First, she had brought a stranger home despite the grove's no stranger policy. The sacred laws had been rammed into her head the day she had arrived in the grove, and she had repeated them one after the other, as the great healer Makoni recited them. And of these laws, one of them had been, "No stranger shall cross the grove's sacred boundaries without approval from the superintendent. The wounded may find refuge, but the unknown shall not dwell among us." Yet of the 8 sacred laws of the grove, it had not taken Yemuari more than 2 moons to overstep this rule, despite knowing that if she were caught, she would be expelled, no questions asked, and she would have to return home, to the place where people had pelted her, first with stones, then later her home, once she had closeted herself in it, calling out, "Witch, witch, witch!" Or she would have to return home to the dungeons she had been condemned to for practicing witchcraft. So she had absolutely nowhere else to go, yet she had made that reckless decision to rescue the injured man, and yet set off a chain of events that had led her to this mushy, muddy, feet-sucking jungle. She had committed a cardinal sin, then regretted it immediately after, and had wanted to dispose of the wounded person. But then the grove's great healer had busted her, and even before Makoni could mete out a suitable punishment, they had discovered that the injured stranger was a fugitive prince with a prize on his neck. Yemu had gone on to further entangle herself in his affairs by accepting the golden crest that was part of the injured man's claim to kingship for safekeeping before the prince had fled. But there in the forest, as she gave the man back his royal crest, and as she bid her first ever patient farewell, she had not expected to find herself further entangled in the affairs of the grove. Yet somehow she had been followed, not only by the prince who sought to find the injured man and end him, but too by the superintendent of the grove, Tangai. In that moment, several things happened at once. The once injured, now healed prince had looked at Yemu with woeful betrayal-filled eyes as he mouthed sadly, "You betrayed me." She did not have enough time to respond, for in that moment she had caught the superintendent's eye boring through her with a promise for hard censure. And even as she looked at the superintendent, she could not help the niggling feeling that prodded her to remember their last encounter, that told her something was off with this man, that he was not in tandem with the grove at all, but nothing came to mind. Yet again, as her thoughts fought in her mind, they had been interrupted when her colleague, another trainee young healer in the grove, Ipai, had burst through the foliage of trees and said frantically, "You have to come, quickly, the grove is falling." And with the words, "the grove is falling," echoing in their subconscious, the superintendent, Yemu, Mati, who was Yemu's friend who had accompanied her to meet the once injured prince, and Ipai, had turned and began a downward scramble out of the foresty mountain towards the grove. "What is it?" Mati asked through rapid gasps of air. "What is happening in the grove?" But all Ipai said was, it's bad," as he tore through the large clumps of moss sitting on the forest floor. It did not take long for them to discover the chaos that had erupted in the grove in the short time they had been in the forest, for as soon as they entered the infirmary, they saw healers, trainee healers, nurses, aides, all gathered in the assembly, their bodies framing a human figure that lay on the ground. Yemu, heart beating, praying that it was not the body of the great healer Makoni that lay on the ground, increased her pace, and as she got closer, it seemed as if a path opened for her and the others. And her fears were realized. It was her, it was the great healer, one of the grove's co-founders, the tough old stooge who had reluctantly opened her arms for Yemu to be admitted into the school. She could hear Tangai and Mati gasp behind her, and Tangai's frantic voice as he called out, "What happened to her? And why are you dimwits just standing around and not helping her? Aren't you healers? Aren't you trained? Where in your training is it said to gawk at patients? Shouldn't you be taking her to the infirmary?" And in the peripheries of her eyes, Yemu could see as people rushed to bend over, and as they lifted the tawny old woman. She could only watch from a distance, because something was happening to her. Something was pushing her mind to open, and she knew what it was. The vision. A vision. She had experienced this all her life to know instinctively that the Grim Reaper was about to show face, and she knew, even before the vision could beam into her mind, that it was Makoni's premonition. Yet no matter how hard she fought against it, trying to claim her subconscious shut by making her body as rigid as possible and screwing the lids of her eyes as hard as she could, the vision was stubborn and came anyways. And there she saw Makoni, her back stooped as she gripped the cane she used as a third leg, walking rapidly, too rapidly for her old body, towards the outhouse building that sat at the very edge of the northern side of the infirmary, the outhouse so hidden behind shrubbery that it took concentration to notice that it even existed. Makoni had warned her about it when she first arrived. "We keep everything that healers and patients bring into the grove, everything that is prohibited in our work as healers. We keep it in that outhouse. You are not allowed to go there unless under strict instruction from your superiors. Only seasoned healers may go there, as some of the confiscated materials may be harmful." And this was where Makoni, lips screwed in barely hidden anger, was headed. The old woman had only opened the door to the outhouse before an assault on her body ensued. In the vision, Yemu could not see what the creature assaulting Makoni was, but she knew what it meant. Kurowane Zhinu. All she could see was the cane being wrenched out of Makoni's hand and being used to pummel the old woman's body. She had slaps across the skin and watched as Makoni's head jerked this way and that under the assault. Instinctively, Yemu knew someone's witchcrafting tools activated for an assault, acting as though they had been waiting for this moment, hungry, angry at the old woman, and wanting to end her. But Makoni had been quicker, and even as the unrelenting assault continued to descend on her, she had called out, "I beseech you, stop, now!" And as quickly as the assault had started, as quickly too as it ended. But the damage had been done, and Yemu saw as the old woman, tired, swooned, then fell to the ground. Then, as always, as in her visions, she heard the weeping of people and saw a grave being dug, and a part of her knew that this would be the end of the great healer. Yemu, however, did not have the time the liberty to digest her vision alone, for someone was already shaking her, bringing her back to consciousness. She forced her eyes open and then reluctantly, hoping they betrayed no emotion, looked up into the superintendent's eyes. She stilled her body, attempting not to shiver from the barely hidden evil in his eyes. Again, she found herself trying to remember their last encounter. Makoni had delegated the superintendent to teach the young healer to handle her emotions. Then something had happened when Yemu reported for her lesson. Yemu remembered standing outside his hut, then remembered waking up in her heart. Something sinister had occurred, and Yemu could not remember what it had been. And now here he was, looking down at her, asking, "What is it? Did you have any other vision?" Of course, Yemu knew she could never tell him the truth. In fact, she was still wondering how he had managed to follow her and Mati to the forest, and why the man had seemed to be on the cruel prince's side. So she nodded and said, "Yes, I had a vision of my grandmother back home. She will not last the week." He looked at her, not even hiding the malevolence in his eyes before saying, "What utter stupidity! Daydreaming of your grandmother at this time when the grove is burning. And don't forget that I know you have been up to no good, meeting strange men in the forest. I will come to that later, and your punishment will be severe. Now, go back to your duties." But even as she walked around the infirmary, checking on her patients, Yemu could not relax. Yes, she and Makoni had not had a great start. The woman had not failed at any time she got the opportunity to point out to Yemu that she had done Yemu a big favor by letting her into the school, especially since Yemu had just dropped in mid-term and way out of recruitment season. 2. Makoni had never been gentle with her, always had been harsh, slightly rude, and if Yemu had to admit it to herself, Makoni was a third justified for her reactions. Yemu hadn't really been exemplary, and yet, even with those differences, Yemu knew that Makoni's intentions with her were not bad. Makoni really wanted her, Yemu, to succeed. And now, Yemu shuddered. If Makoni were to pass, then the grove would most likely to be in Superintendent Tangai's hands, and with Tangai, Yemu was sure where she stood. The man loathed her, and he would not think twice about getting rid of her. And where would she go? Back home was never an option. And even as she thought that, Makoni's words the first night she had come into the grove filtered back to her. "Your gift does not have much use here," the old woman said. "You just see people passing, and that's all. That's no extraordinary gift to make you a healer. Unless," here the older woman had leaned into her, "unless you can use that gift to prevent unnecessary demises." Yemu stopped dabbing the wound of the injured young man who lay on the bed, wincing with agony, and softly, quietly, she repeated the words to herself. "Unless I can use the gift to prevent unnecessary demises." How, she asked herself now as she returned to petting the wound, how do I stop Makoni from passing? She laughed to herself as she thought this. She had only been in the grove for 3 moons, and she had hardly learned how to deal with physical seen by the eye wounds and injuries. How would she be able to help somebody who had suffered a witchcraft attack? Her mind could hardly fathom the thought. A part of her knew that she had to find someone in the grove, someone who could help her. But who? She thought hard and hard. Who was she to trust in this grove? Of course, Makoni had been the only person with whom she had at least had a chat with. Everyone else in the grove treated her with suspicion, wondered how a mere seer with hardly any other gift of healing had been allowed into the grove mid-term. She had not forged any worthwhile relationship, except with Matirasa, and perhaps Ipai. But now she felt she needed someone with more experience to talk to. As soon as she had done her rounds, Yemu walked to the private wards where the most important patients were treated from, the wards reserved for important men and women from kingdoms surrounding the grove. And now they housed the grove's co-founder. She found a muscular young healer standing by the door to Makoni's ward. Before she had even said anything, he was chasing her away. "No visitors allowed," he said, his baritone almost threatening. Any other day, Yemu would have nodded and said, "Okay," and gone on with her life. But today was not the day. So she looked up at him and tried to summon the feminine wiles she had never in her life used, coyly slanting her eyes up and smiling shyly, ignoring the cringe that had settled in her mind. "Please," she said, "I just want to speak to her for a minute." She could see him thawing, looking at her appraisingly, and she hoped her first attempt had worked. Yet still he said, "No visitors," although this time he was less emphatic. She turned up her charm and said, "If you do me this favor, I will return it for you. I could cook for you one day or perhaps do your laundry." She hoped her voice had the same amount of pleading as it did coyness. This time he shifted on his feet, looked at her, looked over her shoulder, then in an almost whisper said, "Look, I am here under strict instruction from the new great healer Tangai not to let anyone in. Maybe come back later in the night when the grove is settled down." Then his eyes darted behind him and he quickly straightened up and a viciousness sprang into his posture. "Look, I have told you a million times already, no visitors here. If you continue being a nuisance, then I will report you to the great healer. Leave." Yemu's head jerked back too, and she saw Tangai striding towards them, his ever malignant eyes trained at her. "You don't tire, young lady, do you?" "I am sorry," she said, bowing. "I was just trying to help. I wanted to bath the patient as it has been my responsibility to take care of the ablution needs of private ward patients." He looked at her hard enough as though he had a truth measure, then finally dismissed her. "Go. I never want to see you here again. I will personally assign someone to take care of the patients here." Then as Yemu turned to scurry back to the dining room just as the bell for supper rang, Tangai told her and said, "Young lady, I have caught you in enough compromising positions in the grove in the little time you have been with us. Now, I want to give you this little warning that I want you to consider as your last. Should I catch you trespassing, should I catch you in any place you should not be, then be assured that that will be your last time, your last day in the grove. Live." She walked away and into the communal dining room, where everyone, even if they wanted to go cook whatever they wanted in the huts, met for breakfast and supper. "Eating together fosters unity," Makoni had said repeatedly, and healers that eat together solve difficult cases together. But she found the dining room very somber. People collected their plates from the off-duty trainee nurses, then went to sit on tables, looking at their plates fondly, hardly touching the food before them. If Yemu had not felt the pain of Makoni's illness so acutely before, now she did. It was as though somebody had passed. She looked over at the faces at the table with her and was sure there were glimpses of tears in them. "Have you guys had anything?" she asked now, her voice a half whisper, trying not to break down too. Even though she had asked the whole table in general, her eyes were trained at Sekuru Zidai, whose unwrinkled hands and milk-white hair were testament to his longevity in the grove. "Is she going to be all right?" she finished. "We can only hope that Msikavanu and the ancestors will work overtime to save her." He shook his head sadly. "In all my life, I have never seen an attack so vicious." "Have you been to see her?" Yemu asked. Sekuru Judai laughed hollowly. "See her? No, the acting great healer has forbidden anyone from seeing her. He did not attempt to mask the disdain with which he phrased acting great healer, and in some way that calmed Yemu's spirit. She was not the only one who loathed Tangai. She had opened her mouth to ask him the burning question in her mind. So how do you treat someone who has suffered from Kuroanezhinu? When her hush fell into the already quiet room. Like all eyes, hers were drawn too to the commotion by the door to find Tangai walking into the room. He had always been a pompous man, always viewed himself in high regard, walking like Msikavanus Jr., but today his gait was even more imperious, more uppity. His eyes swept around the room, and a glint of satisfaction shone in his ever malicious eyes. Then he walked over to the head table, and Yemu could feel the silence turn chillier as he sat in Makoni's chair. She looked up at Sekuru Jidai and saw tears pooling in his eyes, and she knew that for the first time ever, this man who had been in the grove longer than everyone else was seeing someone sit in Makoni's chair. The silence continued throughout the meal as everyone sat, waiting for the bell to ring to release them from this silent hell. But as the janitor responsible for bell ringing stood, Tangais told him with his hand. The young man promptly sat back down and Tangais stood. He cleared his throat and spoke, taking care to pause his face and look at his face in the dining room in turn. As you all know, he said, something atrocious, something antithetical to the precepts of this grove occurred this afternoon. Witchcraft was used in a place dedicated to pure medicine. And that is not all. The witchcraft was sent to attack the matriarch of these walls. What is even worse was that it was not done by an outsider. It was done by you. His eyes had rested on Yemus and she shivered. He did not move his eyes now as he continued to speak, and his voice had taken on a macabre tone. One of us here is not only a traitor, but he has also forsaken the laws of the grove, and has gone to use witchcraft within the sacred grove. I pledge to you now that as acting great healer, I shall not rest until we have found the cancerous weed and dug it out and thrown it out of these walls. I have already spoken to the king of Zero, and he has promised me that if we turn the perpetrator to him, then they will mete out the punishment reserved for witches and wizards in their kingdom, that of stoning. The king has also helped with his warriors, who will from now on patrol within and outside the grove, and as the great healer, I have certified that any disobedience towards the warriors will be met with punishments that can even include being ousted from the grove. So from here, his eyes turned and began sweeping the room, and Yemu almost collapsed in relief. From here, everyone goes straight to their heart. No unnecessary conversations, and anyone caught conversating will be seen as plotting, and that too is punishable. No one is to roam in the grove after this meal, and only those with sheaths are allowed to walk about. Understood? Everyone nodded morosely. Then everyone, he finished. You are dismissed. Stay in your hearts unless you are summoned. But once in her heart, Yemu felt like tearing the claustrophobic walls to shreds. She paced the entire circumference of the heart over and over, thinking hard, but her mind refused to cooperate. Her pacing was only disturbed every few minutes by a peep outside her window, and always she would see the Zero warriors, holding their lamps high up, crisscrossing the paths of the grove. She knew that every moment she spent further from Makoni, the greater Makoni's passing would be likely, and she would have totally, utterly failed. She was startled out of her thoughts when a knock sounded on her door. Breathing heavily, she called out, "Who is it?" The strange voice did not state its honor, but in a monotone tone said, "The great healer said, lights out. Switch off all lamps." Yemu did as instructed, ignoring the blob of tears that had coagulated in her eyes. There was a new great healer now. and Makoni could pass. Yemu's place here would not be secure. Sleep did not come at all that night, and every opportunity she got, she would go to a window to peep outside. As the night wore on, the young healer was delighted to see that the number of lamps roaming the grove had dwindled, until at last there was no lamp. The warriors must have wearied, must have gone to sleep. She ignored the voice that screamed, "No, no," loudly in her ear and walked to the door. Quietly, hoping the night sounds would mask any squeak of the door, she stepped out. She took a deep breath once she was outside, but her eyes and ears were always open, ready for any movement. Then, seeing no one, she tiptoed around the grove, sticking to the shadows and darting quietly along open spaces. It was only when she got to the infirmary that she allowed herself to take a deep breath. But she did not want to waste time, so briskly she walked to the private ward. And as though Musikalani had created a path for her, she found the guard sitting on the floor, fast asleep, head lolling to the side, and a strand of saliva dripping by the corner of his mouth. She pushed the door soundlessly before stepping in. A lone lamp flickered by one corner of the ward, casting pale dancing shadows across the room. The room itself smelled faintly of disinfectant and death, and at any other time Yemu would have found the silence in the ward eerie. But that did not matter now. She was here, and quietly she walked to Makoni. Were it not for the faint flaring of her nostrils, Yemu would have judged by the ashen face lying before her that she had long departed. Yet as she drew closer, and her body cast a shadow over Makoni's face, the old woman's eyes flickered open. At first, they looked at Yemu dazedly. Then Yemu saw recognition color them, and a faint smile appear on the old woman's grey lips. "You," Makoni said, voice so spindly it was barely audible. "Have you seen the Grim Reaper come to carry me away?" Yemu nodded, then quickly wiped the moisture that had pooled into her eyes. "You said," Yemu said, you said I should use my gifts to save people. How can I save you?" Makoni smiled. "It might be too late. The only reason I am still alive is because as a healer, I protected myself from these kinds of attacks. But now my spirit feels tired. I want to go." "Please, don't speak like that. Please, what should I do to help?" Makoni was silent for a while. Then laboriously she said, "First, take the crest that I put under my pillow." Yemu took it and pocketed it. "Give it to my grandson. Find him. If you want to save me, find him." The potion for Kurowanejinu has to be administered by a blood relative, and he is all I can think of. She was silent again for a while when Yemu knew that she was gathering the strength for another instruction. "If I don't make it," the older woman said at last, "then you will have to take over as great healer." She ignored Yemu's gasp and continued, "You are the chosen. I thought we had more time so I could show you some of the ancient secrets of this grove. But as Msikavanu wills this, all I can do is instruct you. There is a cluster of Mawuyu trees a stone's walk from here. There, the founding fathers and I hid." But at that moment, their eyes flew to the door. There were large, determined footsteps in the corridor outside. Then they both heard Tangai's voice as he spoke to the guard stationed outside the door. "How dare you fall asleep at this time?" the acting great healer said, voice harsh. "This kind of behavior will send you packing." As he said the last words of the sentence, Yemu watched in horror as the door before them began to move as it was pushed open. To be continued. Thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. I appreciate you being here. This story is part of a series of stories set in a pre-colonial African hospital, and it explores the intrigue and mystery surrounding the hospital and its characters. Please do continue tuning in for more, and also do not forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share with other people. For now, lots of love and goodbye.